Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel.
I had to put on my reaching hat. Hear me out.
We begin tonight with a mystery unfolding on a BC beach. A human foot has once again been discovered.
This is where it was floating just before the bridge right up here.
Botanical Beach on the west coast of Vancouver Island is a remote but stunning area of the province. It's also where hikers made a stomach-turning discovery on Sunday.
There was a foot, what appeared at that point to be a foot in a sock in a running shoe.
It's the 13th foot found in British Columbia since 2007.
We are asking anyone who may have had their loved one last seen wearing this particular pair of shoes to contact us immediately.
Every time a case like this happens, it gets plenty of attention and sparks plenty of speculation.
Now, you also have to consider whether or not this could be a serial killer.
Hi. Thank you for clicking. And happy Halloween. Today we're going to be talking about the strange occurrence of floating human feet washing up ashore in the Pacific Northwest. Naturally. Of course, there are many theories, from the mundane to the more sinister. So as usual here on my channel, I'm going to give you guys the facts, then we're going to talk about the theories, and you can decide for yourself. Before I begin, you guys know I have to give my thanks to my returning subscribers, old and new. Thank you guys so much for supporting me and watching and stuff. And also, in my last video, I had a bodily function and I left it in the video because I thought it was funny. And like 3 or 4 people were, well, they left me comments that they were disgusted and upset. And I'm sure there were more than those 3 who left the comments that thought it but didn't say anything. As my husband likes to say, I am a little bit rough around the edges. So, I mean, sorry about that. If you are new here, what a way to get to know me. Hi, this is me. I wear a tinfoil hat and I talk about true crime and conspiracies because I think it's funny. And this is well, conspiracy, both, none, one, I don't know, you'll see. It all started on August 20th, 2007. A young girl was visiting from Washington State on Jedediah Island in British Columbia, Canada. And she stumbled upon a severed foot in a sneaker or a tennis shoe, depending on where you live. And then, 6 days later, a second severed foot was found in a Reebok shoe, and this one had washed ashore on Gabriola Island, British Columbia. Authorities naturally were alarmed. Corporal Gary Cox of the Oceanside Royal Canadian Mounted Police told the Vancouver Sun, 2 being found in such a short period of time is quite suspicious. Finding 1 foot is like 1,000,000 to 1 odds, but to find 2 is crazy. Naturally, the media ate it up. And of course, true crime authors were fascinated. There's one Canadian true crime author, his name is Michael Slade, and he said,
you also have to consider whether or not this could be a serial killer, somebody who right now is underneath the radar.
And then a 3rd foot was discovered. It was February 22nd, 2008, and this foot was found near the mouth of the Fraser River. And then a 4th foot, found in May of the same year.
Well, what are the odds? 4 right feet washing ashore in just over a year. Police disclosed new details that only added to the mystery today.
Well, there are a lot of similarities between this latest foot and all the others. There's one big difference, because here on Kirkland Island, you do get a lot of things that wash up on shore, but they wash in from upriver, not from out in the strait. The caretaker of Kirkland Island says the foot wasn't there 2 days ago. Right now, the river current is running at roughly 5 knots, making it impossible for something to drift in from the ocean, adding even more mystery to this case of the 4 right feet. Alan Waterman, CBC News, on Kirkland Island, Richmond.
And then a 5th foot, found in June. The locations of the first 5 feet were all in Canada, which led authorities to think that they were all coming from the same source. Detectives at the time had theorized that the 5 feet belonged to victims of the Quadra Island plane crash, where 5 people had died in 2005. The image below shows the locations of the 5 feet found in 2007 to 2008, with the location of the Quadra Island plane crash in blue. So at first, the Quadra Island plane crash theory, it made sense until the DNA was tested. When they tested the DNA, they found that one of the 5 feet belonged to a female. However, all 5 victims of the Quadra Island plane crash were men. So the mystery deepened. These discoveries led to the inevitable theories. Was it the work of an organized crime ring? Are they bodies floating from the tsunami? What if it's the mark of a serial killer and his signature is to sever feet and throw them in the ocean? Human trafficking, plane crashes, suicides? Or maybe it was just a coincidence. But then, a year later, on August 1st, 2008, a severed foot was found, not in Canada, but this time in Washington. I know I said that wrong, but I'd rather say Washington, which confused experts. All the theories about the wind and the drift and the patterns and stuff kind of was thrown out of whack because the location had now expanded. Adding to the mystery was the way the authorities handled the situation, because the US authorities and the Canadian authorities handled it very, very differently. The US authorities operated on a need-to-know basis. They didn't really announce every foot that washed up to shore. They only mentioned it if they needed help identifying it or if there was some sort of reason where they needed to know, the public, versus the Canadian authorities and media were basically announcing every foot that washed up and explaining what they thought was behind it. And it was to the point where the only way that we could find out about the US feet that washed up to shore in the US was through the Canadian media, because the US media wasn't talking about it. So again, this added to the mystery. Now, my conspiracy, allegedly, don't sue me. I think the reason why the US authorities and media didn't announce each one is because they didn't want people to panic, because again, my theory, I think that people would have immediately been like, oh my God, it's a serial killer on the loose, like panic, buy all the toilet paper. You know what I mean? Fast forward to a few years ago, foot number 14 is discovered. It was discovered by a man who was on a Sunday stroll in beautiful British Columbia when he made a gruesome discovery. It was a human foot in a hiking boot. Now, this is important to mention because it's different from all the other feet. You see, all the other feet were in sneakers or tennis shoes, and this was believed to be a crucial element of the foot floating mystery, because they had theorized that sneakers, tennis shoes, they have foam, which gives them this buoyancy, which also protects the foot, which would allow the foot to remain in the shoe and float in this manner all the way till it reaches ashore. Other than that, the authorities didn't say much about foot number 14. At that time, when the 14th foot was announced, 9 out of the 14 feet had already been identified, and officials had determined that those 9 feet had belonged to 6 people. And according to the police, no foul play was indicated in any of those cases. When the 14th foot was discovered, the general consensus among the authorities was that these were probably remains of the victims of the tsunami in Japan in 2011, and it had taken all that time for, you know, the remains to wash up, and that they had ended up in this area, Pacific Northwest. And the drift patterns and the ocean winds and all that seemed to corroborate that theory. However, many of the victims that were identified had nothing to do with the tsunami. It was at that point that the authorities came out with another theory, who foot 14 belonged to. Foot 14 belonged to a 79-year-old Washington state man who had gone missing almost 3 months earlier. And so then the story went quiet until, you guessed it, foot number 15 washed up ashore, this time in Vancouver. Just last year, around Valentine's Day of 2019, this foot washed up ashore, and this time authorities needed the public's help in identifying who the foot belonged to, because they had done DNA testing and it didn't hit with any sort of database of like a missing person or anything like that. And this is what the coroner's service said. The BC Coroner Service is asking for any information people may have related to the shoe or to whom it may have belonged. The decedent was wearing a light gray Nike Free RN shoe with a black Nike swoosh logo and white base, white laces, and a blue sock. The shoe was a men's US size 9.5 with an ortho light insert. The West Vancouver Police Department, who's working with the coroner's office, came out and said, again, no foul play is indicated whatsoever. And it was during a press conference when the reporters pressed the authorities, pressed and pressured the authorities and said, isn't it odd, what is going on? That these feet, and they're showing up in like one specific area, they're severed, like what is going on? And the spokesperson said, I mean, certainly it is an odd trend. One thing that we know is that these feet that are found, they're not linked to any sort of suspicious circumstance. I want to clear that up to make sure people are aware this isn't a cause for panic. Of course, people, they can't take that as an adequate response. And so, of course, theories. People have been fascinated by this phenomenon for a long time. And one of the men who actually discovered one of the severed feet all the way back in 2008, he had his own theory. He said, there's someone doing this all right. Think about it. If they tied a chain around someone's ankle and threw them overboard, the foot would just pop off. Maybe they got a lot of bodies stored up in a container and they got washed out. We don't know. There's a lot of stuff that goes on over there. The fact is that suicides and accidental drownings are very commonplace surrounding a body of water. And that increases when you have a body of water near a huge city, right? Like Vancouver. And so you would think that maybe there's like a lot of suicides because it's a metropolis and that explains it. But then people were like, okay, well, why isn't this happening in the San Francisco Bay Area? Why aren't these feet washing up in San Francisco? You always see, there's like documentaries about the people who throw themselves off of the Golden Gate Bridge into the water. How come their feet aren't washing up in San Francisco? Why did I say it like that? San Francisco. Turns out there's a logical answer to that too. According to an oceanography professor from the University of Washington, things that float at the ocean surface move with the currents, but also are pushed a bit by the wind. And this can be significant in getting them to shore. The prevailing winds here are west to east. And so floating stuff in this part of the Pacific gets blown to the coast effectively. Turns out that although this area has a high concentration of these feet washing up, there are actually other areas that have had feet washing up ashore as well. There was a lone foot wearing a sneaker that was found in a dumpster next to a boat ramp on the Willamette River near Portland, Oregon. A foot wearing a sneaker was found on a dock in Charleston, South Carolina. Hikers near St. Louis, Missouri found a foot inside a tennis shoe on the banks of the Mississippi River. This phenomenon has occurred in other parts of the world too. One time, a foot washed up in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil right before the 2016 Olympics, near the beach volleyball area. Yeah. Okay, so then that begs the question, why feet though? I mean, people jump, there's a lot of different limbs. Why is it only the feet that are washing up? Is it to do with the sneakers or what's going on?
Much of these discussions involve the feet being severed. We want to make it clear there is no evidence that these feet have been severed. There were no tool markings and no visible sign of trauma.
The feet had been disarticulated due to decomposition, and they were not actually severed in a way that occurred unnaturally. A woman by the name of Gail Anderson, who is the co-director for the Center for Forensic Research at the University in British Columbia, she conducted a weird and gruesome and weird study involving decomposition in the ocean using pig carcasses. I'm going to show you a picture. It's not that gruesome. I mean, to me, it's not. To you, my bar is probably higher than the average person. This is a picture of this study in 2016. They immersed these carcasses in the Salish Sea, the very sea where all these feet seem to be washing up ashore, to see how they could decompose, because it had previously been believed in other studies that actually the human body can remain intact for very long periods of time underwater. But this study actually refuted that. They concluded that the well-oxygenated waters of the Strait of Georgia support a vast amount of aquatic life that in turn could skeletonize a carcass in less than 4 days. Skeptics, they can never accept such things, right? No, they can't. Why? That's not fun, right? So what they then came up with was, okay, fine. It's a human suicides, accidents, they're disarticulating, they're floating. Okay, well, how come it's only happening in 2007? Why aren't sneakers and people from the 90s or whatever, why aren't their sneakers floating? Why aren't their feet showing up? Why is it only happening in this small period of time? The coroner explained that away too. This is what the coroner said. Typical running shoes designs changed around that time, adding in lighter foam and air pockets. So now they float, whereas before they just kind of stayed down there at the bottom of the ocean. And so about that theory about the time and why it's only happening now, it turns out that this actually did happen before, way back before. I'm talking all the way back to the 19th century when people wore leather shoes. Turns out that this leather can protect a foot. In 1894, the Magella, some boat, sunk off the coast of Rhode Island, and a severed foot was found from one of the 5 crew members approximately 12 miles away. In 1913, a woman's foot was the only remain to wash ashore on Lake Michigan in Chicago. In 1930, another foot washed ashore in Gary, Indiana. This one was believed to be deposited in the water by medical students. In 1996, a human foot washed ashore after being improperly confiscated and disposed of by a rogue doctor. To me, it seems like the feet are not connected in the sense that it could be an accident in one case, something more sinister in another. Maybe it is foul play in some of them, but not all of them. I don't personally think it's a serial killer in all these cases. Rather, I think that it's different situations that led to a body being overboard with a shoe, a tennis shoe, and that is what leads to it. And it's hard to find out what happened in each individual case unless they can identify that person and then see what were the circumstances surrounding their disappearance. Turns out, actually, historically, okay, let me tell you guys an interesting story about something that happened in Vancouver, British Columbia in 1887 that led to the naming of an area Leg in Boot Square. And because of a gruesome story about a foot and a leg that washed ashore that ended up being hung by a pike, and then after it went a certain period of time unclaimed, that foot was fed to the dogs. Happy Halloween. Of course, because this is the world that we live in, there were people who created fake feet in shoes.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. It turns out it was a hoax, a gruesome prank. 3 shoes found by a tourist last night at Clover Point packed with meat and bones. But it is not human remains. It is somebody's idea of a sick joke.
I don't care what it takes. We need to find these people and we need to bring them to justice and tell people that our community is safe. And if you're going to be out there doing this, we're going to come for you.
Investigators say the meat stuffed in the shoe was fresh and likely placed there recently.
A former official who worked for the British Columbia Coroner Service said, quote, "We've had people put dog foot skeletons in runners and leave them on the beach, and somebody even used old chicken bones." Ew. So the next time you find yourself near the Salish Sea, be on the lookout for a foot, a severed foot, floating in a tennis shoe. It's probably gonna happen again. So happy Halloween. I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of creepy conspiracy video thing. I had fun making it. I found out about this. I was like, what's going on? And then when I figured it out, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make a video. So I'd love to know what you guys think about this. Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm gonna leave you guys with a scroll of the feet that were identified. Like, I'm just gonna put the date, the shoe, the person, what we found out about it, and I'll just kind of let it run through just so you guys, if you're interested, I didn't want to just like read them off to you. So that's how I'm gonna end this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Happy Halloween.